Hello, and welcome to the Seren Stay-at-Home Series archive. This video features an illustrated talk with Phil Cope, in which he shares some of his favourite poetic responses to sacred springs and holy wells. We hope you enjoy watching it back.
Hi everyone, I'm Mick Felton. I'm the publisher at Seren. I've been working at Seren for a long time now, and I think for the last 12 years or more, I've been working with Phil Cope, producing lots of wonderful books, 5 wonderful books in fact. Holy Wells Wales, that was the first one. Holy Wells Cornwall, Borderlands, which is Philip's just been talking about, which is Wells on the English-Welsh borders. Holy Wells Scotland, here they come now. And most recently, The Living Wells of Wales. And we started with Holy Wells Wales, as I said, and that featured 48 wells in Wales, which we thought was pretty good going. The Living Wells of Wales features 317 wells in Wales. So we feel that we're all getting better, and in particular Phil's getting good at finding all these wells. There are many more that aren't in the book, but we'll leave that for another time. And having tired of Wales for a while, Phil's now working on the Living Wells of Ireland. And I'll pass you over to him now so that he can finish drinking his wine and get in touch with you and tell you all about these wonderful places. Phil.
Thank you, Mick. He's not usually as complimentary to me as that normally. That's amazing, isn't it? Anyway, before we get on with the poetry, which is what most of this evening will be about, let's begin with the big question: why holy wells? I've often asked myself what special characteristics wellspring sites possess that have captured our interest so strongly throughout the centuries. There's obviously, I think, more than one answer. The earth scientist, of course, provides a pretty straightforward explanation. Water evaporating from the oceans forms clouds which rain onto the land, and where faults appear, falls to lower, harder rock, where it collects, dissolving its metals and its minerals until sufficient pressure pushes it back to the surface on its way to the sea. Simple, it would seem, but in the process, I think of this beautifully balanced, perpetual liquid dance. An infinite number of potential journeys are undertaken, stimulating for us a multitude of alternative explanations for and responses to the mystery. And water's often lengthy subterranean travels have been said, interestingly, I think, to give it a memory, the capacity to hold something within its solution of all of the bodies through which it has passed. An interesting idea, I think, which works for me both on a chemical, obvious sense, as well as a place where we might regain a measure of access to beliefs once held. The still water in a natural spring was probably the first mirror within which our ancestors saw themselves. And it's a vision, if you think about it, that is usually accompanied by a view of the sky constantly moving. Perhaps there's something in that, I don't know. Or is it that the eruption of water from the earth was one of the principal determinants of the original geography of human settlement, and that visiting well springs, which have been in continuous usage for millennia, offers the possibility of hearing a faint echo of the stories they once told? Or perhaps it's because it's the fact that water itself connects all the shores of the earth, and that human beings, like the planet, are made up predominantly of this essential to life liquid, and that the ultimate destination of all waters is a rendezvous with the sea, from whence it and all of us originally came. Or perhaps it's all of these things. Water is, of course, one of the most profound of our necessities, both for our physical health, as well as, just as importantly, I think, for the stimulation of our imaginations. R.S. Thomas, in his poem A Thicket in Llyn, wrote, "Navigate by such stars as are not leaves falling from life's deciduous tree, but spray from the fountain of the imagination, endlessly replenishing itself out of its own waters." Sacred springs and holy wells are, for me at least, luminous, liminal places which offer a space to consider the connections between rock, sky, and water, and an access to wider realities, to other ways perhaps of seeing, of hearing, and of feeling, places and tales which have inspired writers from earliest days. Though diverse, as you'll be seeing in the photographs, wellsprings do demonstrate some discernible patterns. Most never freeze or run dry, while some are said to ebb and flow, make strange noises, or are bottomless. The behavior of fish or eels were often read as omens. The movement of a handkerchief on the water's surface was believed to foretell a future relationship's faithfulness and fertility. Some even had the ability to turn objects into stone. Others would erupt with milk, or even with blood. Some were said to be haunted by ghosts and guarded by monsters, were homes to fairies and doorways into their underground dwellings. At other sites, the wells were made curative by a saint's tears or severed head, or its later washing, often leaving permanent marks of blood on the stones or a redness in the water. Here's the cross below that St. Winifred's well that we were talking about, Ruth, earlier on. That's actually created underneath that well house. And the rituals associated with successfully receiving well cures and or messages were similarly often complex. There were times of the year that promised to offer more powerful results than others. Water had to be drunk from a shell or a special cup or even a skull. The correct offerings had to be made, words chanted, rhymes recited, rags hung on trees or bushes. And in response to these rituals, the waters could offer the favours of love, of fertility, and of good health. I visited wells over the years, specialising in cures for warts, for blindness, deafness, scurvy, jaundice, leprosy, rheumatism, epilepsy, gout, skin diseases, indigestion, rickets, and piles. For cancer, toothache, drunkenness, melancholia, and mental illness, and even for boldness and for broken hearts. So something there for all of us then, though nothing as yet, it seems, sadly, for Corona. The novelist Ursula K. Le Guin was right, I think, when she observed that It is good to have an end to journey towards, but it is the journey that matters in the end. Pilgrims knew this very well, of course, the struggle and the pain being a significant measure of the experience. For Australian Aborigines, to walk the land was and still is to engage in the endless dance of creation. And one of the most constantly attractive aspects of my own visits to wellsprings throughout Britain, Ireland, and beyond is similarly this ability they possess to take us on a series of, sometimes, if you're very, very lucky, revelatory journeys. Some of these, of course, remain merely topographical, leading us on occasion up dangerous dead ends or up to our knees in mud. Others, though, can be travels through time and through belief, voyages which some perhaps might call spiritual. These begin, I think, with the pantheistic beliefs of our earliest ancestors. Then take us on through the coming of the Romans and other invaders to these shores, to the arrival of radical new ideas with Christianity, and further to the time of the discovery of seemingly more rational, more scientific explanations for these magical springs during the Spa era. And back today, full circle, it would seem, to the tentative beginnings of a more holistic, more open, hopefully more sympathetic relationship with water, with rock, and with the earth. My own approach to the exploration of the often confused territory that is wellsprings is, like water, a very fluid one, celebrating the widest possible diversity of explanations from those, of course, on offer from our historians and from the study of ancient documents and maps to, equally important in my view, the regular creative imaginings of our poets. This is Mary Sarton from her simple but powerful poem, A Glass of Water. Here is a glass of water from my well. It tastes of rock and root and earth and rain. It is the best I have, my only spell, and it is cold and better than champagne. And in a similar vein, I think these lines of verse are engraved on one of the metal plaques set amidst the wonderfully busy designs, inscriptions and dates on St. Ignatius's well near Glasburn in Inverness in Scotland, in this case, the author being unknown. Then fill to the brim, fill to the brim, let the flowing crystal kiss the cup's rim. For my eye is steady, my heart is true, for I, like the flowers, drink nothing but dew. So water for me, bright water for me, the drink of the wise, the wine of the free. Water is, of course, one of the most profound of our necessities, both for our physical health as well as, just as importantly, I'd argue, for the well-being of our imaginations. Sacred springs and holy wells have always been considered to be places where the meanings of this world fade and where other realities are revealed, something, of course, our poets know all about. Places where people for millennia have journeyed to collect this essential for life liquid, as well as to leave their own small markings of connectedness with other lives lived and beliefs once embraced. So this evening, I want to share with you a small selection of poems which have been inspired by sacred springs and holy wells from throughout Britain and Ireland. I'll begin with a great poetic response from a Welsh writer to the wells at Gumfreston near Tenby in southwest Wales. All three of the wells here have for centuries been held to possess great medicinal properties, each one of which, though closely grouped, providing distinctly different water, each offering a different remedy to the sick. The poem is by Tony Curtis and is simply entitled At Gumfreston Church. That evening, after a hard, hot drive, the dark lane's coolness of trees was like water walked into. Calm and quiet, no traffic, deep shadows, all the gulls out at sea. Augustus and Gwen's father walked the 2 miles from Tenby every Sunday to play the organ here. I search for his headstone and find no one but Ken Handicott, the grocer I worked for one school summer holiday 40 years ago. They leave the church door unlocked. There is no congregation but the curious passing folk, and inside is the simple splendor of stone font, low wooden roof, draped altar, Norman built on earlier significance. St. Tylo, St. Bridget. The place shivers in the dusk and moves into another night. Here were the early missions, saints and sinners crossing the Irish Sea, moving east with their crosses and swords. Here was a quay, a village, the river Rittek, joined to the sea that led to the world. And here, behind the church, before the lepers, where the Magdalens brought their lepers, before the woods where the Magdalens brought their lepers, still flow the 3 springs of purity and healing coming to us from a depth. Water that plays the oldest music. Without thinking, I take a handful and with wet, cool fingers, cross myself. A wonderful line, a wonderful description, I think. Water that plays the oldest music. Let's now dip into the work of Valerie Gillies from her fine Spring Teller collection of poems inspired by the wellsprings of Scotland and published in 2008. This next picture is of St. Fillan's Pool near Tindrum in Stirlingshire. Fillan, as some of you will know, was the patron saint of, amongst many other things, insanity. If people were thought to be mad, they were taken and forcibly immersed in the river Fillan at his holy pool. This is Gillies's response to this ancient custom from her Strathfillan sequence of poems. It's simply called The Holy Pool. It's dusk and a first quarter moon. A mad girl shambles on the riverbank, rotted by rain, splintered by frost, wasted by wind and sun. A turf loosening, she drops into the water, taking a plunge into the holy pool. At a wide angle of the river, the pool is broad and deep, so clear you can see the gravel on the bottom. Fistful of pebbles, her mouth opens. She looks up through the water. Wavy figures are peering down at her. They walk her 30 miles for this. Her brothers drag her to the surface by a rope, tight around her waist. She bobs like a cork, as mad as ever. Wet and wistful, she carries her stones to the 3 cairns round the Lucky Way. It's all happening in the dark. Yes, under what could be the moon, they walk the half-mile to the ruined chapel. Her head centered in the heart-shaped stone, they tie her down under a wooden frame, knotted with ropes. Her cries tug, covered with straw for the night. They place St. Fillan's bell on her head, a crazy nightcap on the girl. Alone, she's hearing the river wave whisper of change in its changes of sound. The pool, the bell, the pool, damp from her face and hair, condenses on the sides of the bell and runs down. Bell, metal, sweats for her. Inside the bell is inside the pool. Someone's drawing on the rope, bringing her up through 4 elements. Pool, where the earth bank holds water. Bell, where fired bronze holds air. Her eyes open underwater, under light. At sunrise, the brothers return to lift off the bell. They see the knots are loose that tied her body and warped her mind. To Cornwall next, and the wonderful sacred spring at Holywell Bay, set in a dark cave, only accessible at very low tide, and revealing a magnificent series of rimstone pools filled with clear cascading waters, surrounded by, when lit, or in my case, there was no light here, in my case on a very long exposure, revealing rocks of rainbow colours. This is Geoffrey Grigson's short poem entitled The Cave. Beyond this ochred nave, sealed lies an inner cave. Its penetralia are not mapped, its cold sand cleanly lapped, and no explorer knows how gradually its dragon grows, fatter each century and brighter blue, has found the clue, and so observed how drop by drop wet centuries pile up, new jewelers' stones and gold upon the layers of the old. And this is a fine new poem by Robert Minhinnick, who's with us this evening, about another, I think, real well-hidden gem, this time much nearer to home. Shwill, known historically as the Great Spring of Glamorgan, flows virtually unknown beneath this now disused pumping station near Ogmore by Sea. Cave divers in 1984 and I think 1998 found tree roots and, more significantly, I think, horse bones here, possibly the remains of an ancient sacrificial site. Horse and bull sacrifices, some of you will know, were once common practices at some of our sacred springs, probably based upon traditions borrowed from the Roman cult of Mithras. This image is actually from a well in Scotland, the so-called Pictish well in Burgh Head, where bull sacrifices were recorded here. The caves at Shwill, the cavers at Shwill reported on many more shafts awaiting investigation, describing the spring intriguingly, this time in Greek mythological terms, as the hypothesized labyrinth. I like that, the hypothesized labyrinth. Schwill was in fact once the main water source for the whole of the Bridgend area, and is by some way the largest freshwater spring in Wales and one of the largest risings in the British Isles. I recently got permission from Dŵr Cymru to access the site. And in addition to being able to observe the ancient waters gushing through the limestone strata from who knows how deep below us, we were also allowed to see the site's artesian well and to go inside the pump house, now disused but still displaying its historic water gauges and pumps, looking to me more than anything else like the abandoned props from some old sci-fi movie. Robert Minhinnick was with me on that visit, and his new poem is called The Great Spring of Glamorgan. It's in 3 parts and has this last line, Welsh text, as its subtitle. It means, to God give praise for pure water. 1. On the oldest map I can find, walls and wells and ancient roads, walls and wells, while Schwill begins as a bud and becomes a berry. Its water first a rice grain, then white as a rice flower. Yes, here the fountainhead, source of anti-thirst, each drop from the honeycomb, this chalk pocked with resurgences, winter pools and godless wells. Yet all these wells are worshipful. Their swallets in the swale as the great spring sweats from Schwill into Puch Swill. 2. Mother, I have dug my fingers into the sand and felt only the ash of Daddy's crematorium urn that 25 years ago you hid behind the cat food tins. This summer so dry, as if water had been banished for millennia. Wells, walls and wells and ancient roads, walls and wells and ancient roads, then here at the wellspring, the fountainhead, on the oldest map I can find. 3. Is there a tachograph for water? A black box? The pumping station that we find has become a museum, its lexicon archaic. Yet the great spring seeps from its limestone lagoons. 6 million gallons, they say, of sweet water today, tomorrow, and through the generations, as if there is a glacier down there, thawing in secret. Follow that. I've also been working on a collection of poems inspired by my visits to and tales told by Irish wellspring sites, and I'd like humbly to share one of these with you next. Probably by necessity, like for all of us now, it's coloured by COVID-19. It's called Pushing a Shamrock Uphill. And it's based upon my meeting with this guy, old David, who regularly cleans the sacred pool at St. Patrick's Well near Clonmel in County Tipperary. Pushing a Shamrock Uphill. Old David is always here, this modern day Sisyphus, in waterproof leggings and a cloth cap, combing the sedge's red hair against the flow, ripping out the weeds that habitually return, refreshed by Patrick's palliative waters. It's said that the saint crossed himself 100 times each morning and the same each night in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, while bathing and baptizing in the waters of this pool, and picking out for us from its nondescript grasses the trifoliate wood sorrel to explain the Trinity. One plant, three petals. Sisyphus, unlike old David or Patrick, though, challenged his gods and even managed for a while at least to trap and chain up death, an inconvenience for his masters, who always used this threatening trick as their trump card. And for his cheek, Zeus made our hero push an enormous boulder up an enormous hill at sunrise each morning, all day, every day. Then at sunset, mercilessly let it roll all the way back down forever. Some even said that Sisyphus was the sun, in this respect, like David, rising early, setting late, a role model, not a rogue. My own daily punishments in these corona days include pushing 70 years up antiquated hills to the bare, scarred tops above my Garrow home, crowned with ancient cairns, coal mining's detritus, new windmills and old horses. From here, you can see the three valleys spread out like dried ferns, their rivers, ribs and veins, clear maps to the sea. And in my pocket, each time I climb, I carry a stone to add to the mountain's swagger, while Sisyphus, we're told, did just the opposite, taking one stone from top to bottom each exhausted evening to make his push that little bit easier the following day. We, all of us, in our different ways, still bother the earth, looking for the lucky coincidence of a four-leafed flowering, though the plants pay us no attention, picked or left alone, keeping their opinions on everything that matters to themselves. And the rocks don't really care where we pile them, up or down, celebrants only to gravity and erosion. From their vantage point, they could watch a young fool in his Wellingtons in the lake below the co-op here, with bucket, sieve and shovel, panning optimistically for gold in the shallowed river after a rainless April. Or if they focused really, really hard to far, far west across the sea, they might even witness not Sisyphus, but two men, one kneeling at the water's eruption, not in prayer, I think, unless perhaps he's giving thanks for his plastic bottles bubbling blessed with water, and nearby old David, still at his hopeful, hopeless task, creating a paradise through his simple labor of putting one foot in front of the other and breathing in and breathing out, postponing death. Many poets and writers have, of course, responded to the neglected and forgotten state of many of our once important wellspring sites. As far back as the time of the Mabinogion's slow accumulative creation, it was recognized that, and I quote, "Unless thou canst defend the fountain, thou canst not defend thy dominions." And this is Waldo Williams from his 1946 poem Preseli, written as a protest then against the Ministry of Defence's plans to use these Pembrokeshire hills as a firing range. He wrote, "We must keep our well clear of the beast's dirt." And this, more contemporaneously, is Lem Sisse from his poem What If? Let me get it right. What if we got it wrong? What if we weakened ourselves getting strong? What if our wanting more was making less? And what if all of this wasn't progress? Wellspring sites have, throughout the ages, provided a powerful focus for ecological concerns as we use up the world's resources, pollute our air, our rivers, our streams and wells. The truth is that many of the living wells of Wales, as elsewhere, are in fact dead. While some of our once important sacred spring, holy well and spas are clearly still visible, and though much less commonly in daily use, the title of my new book, The Living Wells of Wales, is more of an aspiration than a description. It's an entreaty, a call to action even. This is Maura Dooley and part of a fine long poem, The Source, where she asks, what does it mean when a well runs dry? We've taken too much, pumped up, poured out more than we need, and now in Venice, Bangkok, London, we are the slippery, subsiding places of the earth and must learn to manage what has been given. What does it mean when a well runs dry? Here at my door, a window cleaner wants to refill his bucket of water. I will carry the pail like that most precious phial, a twist of glass that held the tears that washed the feet of Christ. I will swing open my ordinary faucet, spill the slops of everyday life down the drain, out to the sewers, swill the blood from the sink, the stains from the sheet, and call on those saints, Bridget, Anne, Winifred, whose faith was as knowledge, an awakening, a promise, a splash of cold water to the face. There are, of course, positives too to celebrate, groups who are preserving their precious wellspring sites, and even some examples of new wells being created in a belated realization, perhaps, of the importance of these places, not just to our history, but also for our physical and imaginative lives today. One of my favorite poems of eventual hope, I think, is called An Tobor, or The Well, by Cathal O'Sarkey, who's an Irish poet writing in the Ulster dialect of the Irish language. And I'll end this evening with this, translated here by Frank Sewell. The poem speaks, I think, of the critical need to remember the many and diverse levels of gifts that the pure water from a natural spring provides, particularly in hard times like these. And I've illustrated it here with some of my most recent Irish wellspring images. An Tobor, The Well by Cathal O'Sarkey. It'll set you up for life, said old Breed, fire in her eyes, handing me a bowl of well water, the cleanest in all Gliananatha, from a well kept by her people's people, a family heirloom tucked away in a secluded spot with a ditch like a moat around it and a flagstone for a lid. When I was coming into my own back in the early 60s here, there wasn't a house around without the same sort of well. Everyone was all chuffed then about how clean and healthy theirs was kept and wouldn't let a speck of dust cloud its silver lining. And if a hint of red rust was found, they bailed it out right away using a tin bucket. Then, to keep the well sweet, freshened it regularly with kiln lime. From our family well sprang bright, clear water full of life. With tins and crocks, they dipped into it day after day, and any time their throats were parched by summer's heat, it slaked and soothed them in fields and bogs, a true pick-me-up that set them hop, skip, and jumping for joy, cleansing them all their lives. For a long time now, running water snakes towards us from distant hills, and in every kitchen, both sides of the glen, water spits from a tap, drab, lackluster water that leaves a bad taste in the mouth, while among my people, the real thing is forgotten about. Brid once said, "It's hard to find a well these days," as she filled up another bowl. They're hidden in bulrushes and grass, choked by weeds and green scum, but for all the neglect, they've lost not a drop of their true essence. Find your own well, my lad, for the arid times to come. They dry up who steer clear of sources. Great last line, I think that. They dry up who steer clear of sources. I love that. The importance of staying near to the source. Both, yes, of course, of water, as well as of the real things, the deep things, the things that have, or at least should have, real meaning and real value in our lives, in whatever a difficult lockdown, isolating conditions that we find ourselves. So there we are, a few of my favourite sites and a few of my favourite wellspring inspired poems, all of which and many, many more are featured, of course, in my books. I hope you enjoyed some of them at least. Thank you for listening and watching.
Thank you very much, Phil.
Silent clapping.
Do you want to do a bit of a Q&A, Phil?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Or,
We've got a little
not
bit
just
of
questions, comments, criticisms, objections.
Also enjoyable. Thank you. Thank you,
Oh, thank
dear.
you, Angela. I think you already heard the first third of that in that lovely church in North Wales.
R.S. Thomas's Eglwys Fach. Yes.
Correct.
St. Michael. Yes.
Correct. Yeah.
It's a long way from here. Where I live, it's on a spit of gravel on the edge of the fens in East Anglia.
Long way.
Very different terrain. Yeah.
Yeah. But you have wells there.
I have to confess, I'm not aware of any.
Really?
It's where it's not drained fen. It's actually very dry, and the problem nearby to us is that artesian wells of the London Basin and Cambridge and so forth are causing the water table to drop so rapidly that trees and other the balance pools for a spring that provides the water for an old water system into Cambridge are all running dry. There's been an appeal by Cambridge Past, Present and Future for volunteers to go out at the moment and water trees in order to preserve them.
Yeah. Robert, I assume, will know all about this. Robert is here, and it was his poem about Shrill that I read. But he's not muted. He needs to be unmuted.
Hang on, I'm on it.
Okay.
There we go, should be unmuted.
There he is.
Okay. Thank you, Phil. I really enjoyed the talk and enjoyed the poetry and especially your own poem. I was going to ask about the future events for you this year. I know you were going to America and that has probably been cancelled.
Postponed. It's going to happen next year, they're saying now.
Okay, that's great. You were due to come to Porthcawl to do another talk in the green room on the 31st of July. I would imagine that cannot go ahead.
No.
But we haven't had an indication yet from the government that it cannot yet.
Yeah. You know what the last talk was that I did?
Yes, please. What was it?
It was for you.
Oh, was it?
at your place, at the green room.
And the green room, and that sold out. That was full.
Yeah.
There were 32 people there, Phil, and you couldn't get any more people there. And it would be hard to get those 32 people there observing social distancing.
Yeah.
I don't think you could do that in that space.
Yeah. But this is wonderful, isn't it? I mean, I think, I haven't done anything like this before. I've never used Zoom before. Isn't it great? And all these people from Ireland and from the States wouldn't have come to a talk in your place, even if you'd paid them. So, it's maybe we'll discover things, discover new ways of doing things as well.
Maybe.
Well, thank you so much.
I'm sorry, I couldn't answer the question about Cambridgeshire trees. I don't know. I'm sorry.
Phil, I just want to thank you so much for
Constance. Hi.
Yeah, hi, for alerting us, for sending me the notice, because this is just so enriching to see you well and to hear your amazing talk and poetry and your photographs. I really can't thank you enough.
Oh, thank you.
I'm really glad that this event is happening and that there can be this connection among all of us who know you and your work and just know how beautiful and creative you are.
Well, to tell people how we met, not just you. There's a number of us here who met up. When was it? 2 years ago now? Was it?
Yeah. 2018.
2 summers. Yeah, 2 summers ago.
Spring of 2018, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Do you want to unmute Kathy and Tom? And I don't know if Louise.
Yeah, Kathy and Tom. Can they be unmuted?
Yes. What's their name at the moment today?
Huh?
Find them in the list. What's the name that they're logged in under?
Kathy with a K. And then there's an iPhone, 612-859-0503. That's another couple that were on the tour in May.
Yes.
Hi.
Thank you.
Oh, Kathy's all right now.
I'm unmuted.
Hello, Phil. Hi.
Hi.
Tell people what we did 2 years ago.
Well, we went on a trek. We went on a pilgrimage to the Holy Wells in Pembrokeshire. We went to St. David's and stayed there a few nights, and we walked along the south coast path.
It wasn't far, was it? It was just round the next bend, wasn't it?
Right. I know.
That was a joke. Sorry.
And then
we went in the church in Gumfreston, and Kathy sang. We all sang, and Kathy is in that famous photo in your book singing.
Yeah. Well, you all are. You are all in the book. You're all in
the
latest book. Yeah, it was a great time.
So Phil was our guide. He was our expert on the wells. None of us would know any of this if we hadn't connected this way. This whole world that Phil opens up to people, and that again, during this really difficult time, gives me such joy and kind of reawakens the memories of what it's like to learn and to be opened up to this whole world that you explore and enlarge, Phil. So I just feel, so enriched to have met you and seen you again today.
As we sit here watching, just beside our computer is a series of pictures flashing at us from everything we did in that week.
Yeah.
So we're seeing all of you again.
Yes.
And it's not just you that doesn't know about those places. That's what is so weird, that you go on the coast path. Millions of people go on the coast path every year. And I always stop them and talk to them and say, have you been, walk 100 yards up there and you'll find the most interesting thing you're going to see all day. But people just walk past it. you know, and that's everywhere. There's a lovely story. I can't remember what book it's in, but it's about, there's a well in Cardiff in Llandaff in Cardiff, which is beautiful well. You see a picture of it. It's in the last book. I think it's in the first book and the last book. And this is beautiful stone house on the main road in Llandaff, and it's got carvings of frogs and fish and all kinds of things on it. It's the most wonderful thing, and one of the things I like to do when I'm bored is to go there, because it's not far from my mum's house. I go there and literally stand outside it on the road and stop people and say, excuse me, do you live around here? And they say, oh yeah, I lived here 40 years, yeah. So do you know if there's a well around you? No, nothing like that. And you stood right in front of it. You know, people just don't know. But then when they do know, they become like you. They become, you know, passionate and crazy and mad and obsessed, which is good.
Some people do know, don't they, Phil? I mean, you were involved with the Keep Wales Tidy project for renovation of wells. I mean, can you give us an update on what's going on with that?
You trying to bring me down here?
No, not.
No, I mean, Keep Wales Tidy completely ballsed up a £1 million application which had been granted. I mean, it's
yeah.
Don't go there. The money is still there. You know, it doesn't get kept for somebody else to come along. But the possibility for those people, now I'm talking about in Wales, the possibility of money being there on the table, ready for people to apply to do work in their communities, that is still there. But you know, the idea of doing a major project for the whole of Wales, which we successfully raised the money for, all of it, it was all there, it's all, you know, was just ruined by Keep Wales Tidy.
Putting bureaucracy aside, I mean, it's heartening that people are still interested in wells and still, you know, want to renovate and use them effectively.
Yeah. When they know, there's nobody I've met who, when they know, don't go, wow, you know. I used to, when I was doing my talks, I should have done it today. And when I sell my books at the talks, I used to give a government health warning and I used to say, if you do stay in this talk, or if you do buy one of my books, you will become addicted. You know, you'll go, oh, there's one just up the road, so we'll go there this weekend. And then you go, oh, that was a good one. And then you'll drink the water and you'll go to another one. Then you go to another one. And in the end, you become addicted and your life will change. So I say to people, if you don't want your life to change, you don't want to become an addict, please leave now. And please do not buy any of the books. So I probably shouldn't say that, Nick. Maybe that's why they're not selling. No, they are.
I think Estelle has a question. If she's
yes.
Estelle, hello, Estelle.
Hi, Phil. I really enjoyed your talk and fantastic images and the poetry. I go often to Aberdaron, where R.S. Thomas was the vicar. I just wondered if you'd been to any wells on the Clyn Peninsula, or maybe even on Bardsey.
Absolutely. I mean, everyone told us. Have you been to Bardsey?
Oh, yeah.
What, have you found the wells?
No.
we were told there's no wells in Bardsey, right? We found 19.
19?
Yeah, it's in the book. Buy the book. There's a whole chapter on Bardsey. Yeah, I mean, one of the things I often talk about is how holy wells are always in the out-of-the-way places. You know, not because they always were, it's because they've been forced there as so-called progress happens to us. The places that actually, for me, are the most important places are pushed to the margins. They're always on the margins. So actually the most interesting and significant wells today, might not have been in the past, in Wales are on Ynys Môn, on Anglesey, the Clyn Peninsula, Pembrokeshire, at those extremities, or on islands. And I mean, Llyn has this wonderful 2 lines of wells, one going the north route and one going the south route, all ending up in Bardsey. Ian's the one for all this. I know I keep saying that. Yes, Ian really is the expert. Ian, the well hopper, go on his website immediately after this. He took me to so many places that I didn't know about.
Ian the well.
Do you want to come in there, Ian? Because you're frozen out.
I haven't.
Yeah, no, I'm on, and yes, as you say, down the Fleam Peninsula in Aberdaron is the perfect place to be. I wish I was there now.
Why?
How are you surviving with, not being able to go to these places, because that's so much part of your life?
Doing a lot of research, but I have to work at home. I'm still fully employed, but yes, in my spare time, I'm finding a lot more places to go to as soon as we're allowed back across the border.
Hey, Phil, it's Constance again. I wanted to ask, when were you on Bardsey? Because we went there with Howell and Aberdaron a couple years ago, and there was a young man there, the man who does the ferry, and
he's the man.
He had visions of distilling whiskey on the
That's
island.
right. In the lighthouse.
Yeah.
He bought all that land now.
Did you talk to him about that? Do you know if it's still
He
on?
was the one. He was the one who showed. He's wonderful. You have to go with. Well, you can't. I don't think you can go any other way unless you've got your own boat, can you? So you go with him, and he takes you. And if you ask him, he will take you to the wells. And as I say, he took us to 19 wells.
His name is Colin. And
Colin,
he's the son of Christine Evans, who is a Welsh poet of the area.
Oh, right, yes. Yes.
Well, when was that you met him?
When I met him.
Actually 2 years ago or something. Because the book came out 6 months ago, and, it takes you that long to... It's in the book. I'm sure it's in the book.
Which book is it in?
The latest one, the one you're in.
Oh, okay.
There's a whole section. Yeah, I think all the wells are in there. Yeah, I think so.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Great.
But yeah, that's where the real richness is, the depth, the richness is in those places, I think. Places where people don't go, places, because everyone goes to Cardiff and Wrexham and Swansea, the important places. But actually, the important places, I think, are somewhere else. Like the man said, find your own well, my lad, for the arid times to come. They dry up who steer clear of sources. It's getting back to that source.
And are the wells on the are they associated with a pilgrimage walk to Bardsey that starts?
The strange thing is, of all those wells, only one of them has which is very strange, only one of them has a saint's name. Another one is called the Monk's Well, and it's actually 3 wells next to each other. There's a lot of wells with 3 wells next to each other. But the only connection they thought, the only use of that well was for the wells to go and shave their heads, which is why it's the Monk's Well. So it's very strange that because it's such an incredible, religious site, it doesn't actually have very many saintly wells or wells named for saints, which is strange. I don't know why that is.
Thank you.
Okay, if no one else has if anyone does have a question, wave madly at me now if I haven't already unmuted you. Okay, there's
Evelyn,
2 people
she
waving
needs
madly.
unmuting.
So if we just have these last 2 questions, and then I think we'll wrap up for the evening, if that's all right.
Yes, very quickly. Ian and I have met a few times at the conference of the Holy Wells of Wales people. It's nice to see you, Ian. And also, we're running a Facebook group, the Holy Wells of Wales. And if anyone wants to join that, we are on it. Ian does a lot for us. And then it's really up to you to join and have some fun with us. That's all I wanted to say.
recommended.
Great.
Who was the other one? Was it Ruth?
Yeah. I was just wondering whether you'd come across the well-dressing tradition in the Peak.
Derbyshire.
Yeah?
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah. Completely unique. Do people know about this? In Derbyshire, I was going to say, go there in the summer. Well, absolutely wonderful. Yeah, it's totally unique, isn't it?
Yes, basically local churches in the community get together over the period of a few days. They put together clay boards and then make murals to go around every well and decorate it very beautifully. And generally they use only natural materials, so you'll be looking at hundreds of seed heads, flower petals, that kind of thing. The Peak District, by the way, is not particularly mountainous, not alpine anyway. Peak actually refers to the people who were the inhabitants of it at one time, rather than the topography. And if you are coming over to England, then it is well worth checking out. Absolutely beautiful. They tend to have a different date for the celebration in each of the small villages involved, and I think there's about 20 of them all together, and they do them on different weekends. And the way to find out, I'm sure there's a website for
website, yeah.
And I'm sure that the Peak District National Park would be able to tell you as well. So if you're thinking of planning a trip to England for next year, maybe include the Peak.
Do you think it'll happen this year?
It's looking increasingly unlikely that people from abroad will be able to come to England without going through 2 weeks quarantine, although nothing's officially been announced. This does seem likely to happen now. And by the time it opens up, it's likely the well-dressing season will be over, because it is a summer activity. But you never know, and it might be possible for some English people to travel and go to see them, depending on the local attitudes to people wandering around outside their home territory at the moment. It is a bit of a controversial one, but normally you'd be extremely welcome there.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the only place where I've seen that replicated is, but not half as well, the Peak District does it. You know, there's hundreds of years of experience there, is the Malverns. You know, there are, they have a well dressing, which I'm sure is copied, the Peak District, Derbyshire, but they do it there every summer as well, with the 40 wells or however many there are all around the Malverns.
Well, maybe that's your next book. Go and find out about some well dressings.
It's been done. It's been done. There's some things. There's some. I got 3 books on the go anyway. So,
okay, that's probably enough.
There's some very, very good books on the well dressing in Derbyshire.
Yes, we have got a couple of them. Okay, thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Phil. We'll look forward to seeing your next 3 books. Please.
Yeah.
I want to say thanks to you, Phil. I want to say thanks to Sarah for both organising this, but also flashing up the images in the right order.
Oh, yeah, thanks, Sarah.
Well done.
And I want to say thank you to the 26 of you who've been kind enough to turn out and listen to Phil. Probably more, once again, in the case of many of you. So, yeah, it's been a great evening. We've all enjoyed it immensely, I'm sure. But sadly, it's time to say goodnight.